How's it going, everybody? Combo here. We have something a little different today. I feel like you're probably used to hearing that. Today we have ourselves a nice tier list. I understand these are easy. People do them because they do well and it takes no effort. But we're actually going to put some thought into this, and I've watched a few tier list videos this season, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really agree with any of them. I've taken my own feelings and the community feelings on the weapons this season, put them all together, and tried to make the most cohesive and accurate tier list for not only competitive, but also the average player, which, let's be honest, is most people. So let's talk about it, right? We have 5 tiers here, starting at Avoid. I'll be honest with you, there's not many weapons in this tier. Basically, just don't use them until they get a buff, unless you are avid and you're waiting for a glow up. Niche is essentially like, hey, in the right hands, this weapon is probably really good, you know, but also there's a huge skill ceiling and skill factor that goes into them, so I don't feel it's appropriate for me to effectively rank them, right? Because once again, a great player could probably have them almost feeling overtuned, whereas a terrible player, you should probably avoid them. The next one we have is okay. This is kind of middle of the row, maybe could use a little bit more love, but you're not really hurting yourself by using them. Competitive is what I think the gold standard for weapons should be. It's not overtuned, but it's also not like mid, right? It's in a perfect spot, it's powerful, and should be the precedent for other weapons to follow. And then finally, we have overtuned, which is this weapon dominates in every single scenario. It's absolutely busted, and you should be using it. We're not gonna have many weapons in this tier, so yeah, be prepared for that. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Starting things out with the Deagles. These actually just came out this season. In my video where I did a guide on these, I feel like I might have overhyped them just slightly. I said they might be a little too strong, but after using them in game and also talking with people in the comments section, I feel like these belong in competitive. And that's because I don't necessarily think they're overtuned, because they can be a bit inconsistent, but as far as damage goes on the heavy build, these absolutely reign supreme. They also have very good range, and in my opinion, right, if you're really good at hitting these shots with the Deagles at super long range, you could maybe say the range is overtuned, but generally speaking, I think competitive is a healthy place for them. The next one we have here is the 93R, and this is a bit of a doozy. It did receive a buff this season, as it has received since it came out, because when it first came out, I would have had it down here. But as it stands right now, I'm actually going to put it in okay, right? I don't think it does a ton of damage, but seeing that it's a burst weapon, it's very consistent. If it were up to me, what could possibly put this in competitive is if you could put a sight on it. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like the irons on this weapon just aren't very good, and if you could put a sight, maybe I'd bump it up, but as it stands right now, I can't say in good conscience that these are on the same level of the Deagle. These, I'm thinking dual wielding. This, the 93R, is on the same level of the Deagle. You can certainly have success, but as it stands right now, it's just kind of okay. Now we have the AKM. This did get nerfed. It lost a few bullets in the magazine, however, it did get sights. Personally, I actually really like the irons on the AKM. It's what I'm used to using, but I don't think there's any arguing this. People can say, oh my god, it lost 3 shots, this and that. It's still a very competitive option. I never thought the AKM was like super busted by any means. It was a meta pick for a very long time, but even when it was at its peak, right, when I had everything going for it, I never thought it was overtuned. It always felt fair, and that's what I like about it. It rewards skill. Now that you have a sight, you know, losing those rounds might be worth it for you. You know, regardless of how you feel, I feel like it's similar to the Deagles. It's a gold standard for balancing. It's not too strong, it's certainly not too weak, and I think it finds itself in a very healthy place in the meta right now. Next up, we have the bow, and I see so many people rank the bow low, and personally, some of my highest kill games are with the bow. It's essentially like having the sniper, but you have the ability to contend at those closer ranges, which you can certainly do with the sniper, but with the bow, it's, I don't know, it just feels cleaner, right? Of course, it is a travel time weapon. It does deal pretty decent damage, especially headshot damage is very good with it. But personally, I don't feel good putting in okay or avoid. I'm gonna put this in niche, because I think if you take the time to really master this weapon, right, because it's so different from everything in the game, I think you can have a ton of success with the bow. I would even put it competitive, like myself using the bow, right? Because I put a lot of time into learning it and practicing with it. I would put it in competitive, right? I would walk into a ranked lobby with the bow and I think I would do fine. However, if you're not used to using it and you're used to hit scan weapons, it's gonna feel bad. So for me personally, I think niche is a great spot because it can be competitive, but generally speaking, it is going to take time to get it there. Next up, we have the CL40, and this is where people definitely draw their pitchforks at me because they're like, where is he going to put it? So this thing recently got nerfed. I say that in air quotations because it actually got a 5th round, which is wild to me that people are calling this a nerf, because one of the biggest flaws of the CL40 is, yeah, you can sit in the back of the map and spam your shots all you want, but you only have 4. So it's not, you know, there's a risk reward with it. But now that you have 5, even though you lost some damage, the fact that you have 5 shots now makes a huge difference. I'm going to put it in competitive. I think if you play around this right, definitely go watch my CL40 video because there's a lot of tips in there that I don't see people take advantage of, such as bouncing shots off walls with jump pads and gas mines, and there's so much tech with this weapon that I don't see people take advantage of. All they do is take high ground and shoot down, and then it gets nerfed, like the blast radius and the damage, and people cry. But if you're using this thing at the highest level, right, I don't think it's niche. I think you could immediately apply the stuff I show off in my video, and it is definitely competitive. Next up, we have the Dagger. I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory, definitely overtuned. No, jokes aside, the Dagger definitely going in niche. Dagger players are a special breed. Your guys' patience is absolutely wild. It did get a change this season where you can actually hold it down instead of just pressing the heavy attack and it automatically doing it. You can hold it down. This is good with the dash because you can hold it, dash through people, and hit those backstabs. Personally, I cried. I actually used to use the Dagger a lot back when the Akiba step was still in the game. I also invented the Calms in combo, or not invented, but I was one of the first people to post it, essentially allowing you to swing it really fast, but they took those 2 things away, which I think really sucks. I love tech like that in the game, but regardless, I'm getting on a tangent. The Dagger can be very good. You know, a heavy attack to the back and a quick melee can kill a heavy, which is wild. One of the fastest kills in the entire game if you can do it, and once again, a really good patient Dagger user. You know, it's really bad. It's really bad to play against on the receiving end because just out of nowhere, you're just gone. So definitely gonna leave that there. Now we have the dual blades, and this is one where I want to say, oh, it's niche. Be honest with you guys, avoid. These definitely need a buff, in my opinion. I made a video on them, and I showed some stuff that you can do. A tip for those who really want to use dual blades, use them with ziplines, right? Put down a zipline to an objective, jump on that zipline and guard. You can actually reflect shots back to people while you're on that zipline, and that allows you to kind of clear that gap a little bit. But as it stands right now, I think they need a rework, and if I were to do it, you know, we have the thing like the Riot Shield, which allows you to block damage. All you need to do with these is allow you to still send shots back at people, but just have a cooldown on when you can do it, right? So you press the button, you hold it up for 3 seconds, right? You don't take damage while you're blocking, you reflect everything back, but now you have to wait like 5 seconds to do it again, right? So you have to time it. There's a skill aspect to it. That's what I recommend you do, but as they stand right now, no, they're no good. Definitely avoid them and wait for a rework. Next up, we have the Famas, and this one's interesting because it's kind of went under the radar for a while now, and it did just get a sight, which is, it got the ACOG, which I'm not a huge fan of, right? I kind of like the sight on the Famas as it is. I'm kind of torn on this one. I think in the right hands, it can definitely be competitive, but once again, having that burst weapon archetype, it seems like Embark doesn't want to make these do too much damage. I definitely see the AKM used more than the Famas. I've used both myself. I feel like I take people out quicker with the AKM, so I'm gonna put it in okay. I could see the argument for potentially putting the Famas in competitive, but as it stands right now, I don't think it's not quite there yet. Once again, you're not hurting yourself by using it, but I don't think it's the absolute most competitive option as it stands right now. Alright, so now we have the FCar. So the FCar is an interesting one, right? This weapon has a lot of history. It used to be really OP, got nerfed a bunch, everybody used the AKM, but the FCar has slowly made itself relevant again, and I feel like this and the AKM are kind of in the same kind of like tier right now, where it's like, if you like the damage, use the AKM, if you like the consistency, use the FCar. So without, I think it goes without saying, I think this is a very competitive option. I think for me, I think this is the most consistent weapon in the entire game, right? If you just want overall reliability, it has good hip fire, it has great range control. If you just tap fire this weapon, there's like no recoil and you can hit people across the map. And even at those medium ranges, once again, if you just time your shots and hit headshots, it's really hard to lose a gunfight. So for me, FCar is still super consistent, super reliable, so that's where it ends up. Next up, we have the flamethrower. Now, this one's interesting because the flamethrower, if there's a melee build in the game, right, the flamethrower is going to counter it. Does a lot of damage, especially if you combine it with like goo grenades and the goo gun. You can do some really cool stuff with it. I love doing that. I don't necessarily think it's competitive, but I definitely think it's okay. You can argue that if a light is using smoke, for example, or if it's a super long-range map, you might struggle. But because of things like the winch claw and the fact that even though smoke got buffed, I rarely see people use it. And just because this thing can absolutely melt people. And the nice thing about it is it really doesn't take much aim. You kind of just have to be in the general direction of who you're shooting at, and you can do a ton of damage. Once again, I don't necessarily think it's like competitive, but it's okay, right? There are situations where it's kind of useless, but in the situations that it does well, it does very well. So personally, I think it's okay. I don't necessarily think it's competitive, but there's no reason to avoid it. Alright, so next up we have the KS-23, and I feel like this is going to be a very controversial one. People may not agree with me here, but I'm going to put it in competitive. And the reason being, I made a video on it when it first came out. It wasn't super great, and they changed it. They buffed the rate of fire. They took away some of the damage at range. But what's nice about it is this weapon is so good at dueling, and I don't think people use it how they should. A lot of people will use it like a shotgun, where they'll try to get in people's face, you know, run out in the middle of the open and just get lit up. I use this thing almost more like the R357 because you have the ability to like poke people. And if you use this with like, let's say the goo gun, right? You can make cover and you can peek in and out and shoot people. And even though, you know, once again, you're not going to do like a ton of damage at those longer ranges, you can still do it. And when you do get in those closer ranges, yeah, it is still a shotgun and it does a ton of damage. So once again, definitely watch my video if you haven't tried this thing before, because it can be a little difficult to pick up initially, but I really think, and I mean this, like in the right hands, this is a very powerful weapon, and people just don't give it a chance, and I don't know why. Alright, next up we got the Lewis gun. This thing actually got a buff this season, in Season 4, where they finally tuned back the recoil. I'm thinking about making a guide on it, because I feel like it's in a pretty healthy spot right now. Definitely competitive, everybody's talking about it, does good damage, has really good range. I mean like really good range, better than the MG, and right now, like I said, I think it's healthy. I think it's much better than okay. I don't think there's really a situation where you have this and you're at a disadvantage per se, so I definitely think Lewis kind of goes without saying. Very consistent, very powerful, definitely a competitive pick. Now we have the LH1, and I swear by this weapon, this is my competitive pick on the late build. If you put me in a room and said, win a tournament or win a 1v1, I would pick the LH1 because I think it is so powerful. So I'm definitely going to put this in competitive, and I'll explain why. Even though we have weapons like the Pike right now, even though it did get nerfed, and a lot of people are just like, oh, the Pike is just a better LH1. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think they serve very different niches, because the Pike is better at those longer ranges, and you can definitely use the LH1 at longer ranges, especially because it got a sight now. I like the iron sights personally, because even though it's technically a long-range weapon, I like to get in people's faces with this thing and just barrel stuff, because if you're right in somebody's face, you can just land headshots and melt people so fast. I mean, ridiculously fast. And if you really practice, you can hit those shots at those longer ranges too, and you can still deal a lot of damage. It's definitely an all-arounder. Absolutely love it. If you haven't, give it a try. It is wonderful. Now we have the M11. Now this one, so this is kind of a hot take here. I want to put this in, I almost want to put it in overtuned, only because with the addition of the sight, it takes away one of the big disadvantages this weapon used to have, which is that the iron sights kind of sucked, and it kind of forced you to use it at those closer ranges, which it always did good at, right? It's got a huge magazine size, it does amazing damage, but you couldn't use it at those longer ranges like the other SMG on the light. So I'm debating if I don't know if I want to put it in overtuned, right? Because as it stands right now, I think it is the easiest weapon to use on the light build, and I also think it's the most rewarding, which is not how it should be. So right now I'm going to put it in overtuned, just because the reason I say that, like I said, there's no situation where you're really at a disadvantage. Of course, don't try to shoot people across the map with it, but that's just game sense, right? I think we can agree on that. It has a huge magazine size. With the addition of the sight, it gets rid of those really bad iron sights, and once again, it's just so easy to light people up. It hasn't been nerfed in a long time. And as it stands right now, I think it's a lot better than the XP54, and there's really not a downside to using it. So as it stands right now, this weapon makes its way into the overtuned tier, and yeah, that's kind of why. Let me know what you think in the comments on this one. at least in my games, right, in the more competitive ones, when I see a light, I am like 90% expecting, like, all right, I see a light, he's going to be using this weapon. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. This is like the yin and the yang, right? You have the Lewis gun, which is good at those longer ranges, and also consistency. It shoots a little slower, whereas the MG is just get in somebody's face and gun them down. I'm going to put this in competitive. I don't see many arguments against that. Once again, there's not a situation where it's really bad to have. It's overall really consistent, especially if you get in somebody's face, right? Especially those first few rounds kick pretty hard, and then it levels out. And if you're in somebody's face, and it levels out, you know what I mean? One of the things I preached in my video was pre-firing a little bit. If you pre-fire and then engage into the gunfight, you have like no recoil, and you can just absolutely shred people, especially because you have 350 health. This thing is a dueling machine, and if you can get that recoil down, you just don't lose duels, right? Super, super strong. But because it is a little rough in those first few shots, and it's not amazing at range, you know, I don't think it's overtuned. I think it's pretty balanced, and I think this and the Lewis gun do a good job at keeping each other in check. All right, moving on. Now we have the M26 Matter. This one's pretty interesting. I don't think it's necessarily competitive. I think it still is kind of weak. It doesn't do a ton of damage. Of course, you can move around. It's really good at being annoying, that's for sure. You can shoot people from those longer ranges. But as it stands right now, I think it's more okay. I definitely think it has a lot of weaknesses, which is that, once again, you have to get in people's faces. It doesn't do as much burst damage as the SH-1900, and you know, I just think it needs more damage personally, right? What's nice though, as I said, is you can be at those longer ranges and just keep firing shots and being obnoxious. Like, even if you're not doing a ton of damage, you're stopping people's health regen, which I know sounds minimal, but in this game, right, not having full health, I think if you played Terminal Attack, you would know that certain weapons become a lot better when people don't have full health. Sniper. You get what I'm saying? This weapon is really good at keeping health down, but as it stands now, I don't think it does a ton of damage. So if it were to get a slight damage buff, I could definitely see it going in competitive, but right now, I think okay is a fair spot for it. All right, so now we got the MGL. So this one, you know, a lot of people might think of Void, right? It's not great, you know, it doesn't destroy stuff super well, but let me tell you, I've played against people and I've seen people on YouTube that are absolutely nasty with this thing. So personally, I'm gonna put it in niche. I think if you're really good with this and you understand it to a science, I think it can be competitive. I really do. A lot of people just think it's bad because it's not a point, click, and explode like the CL40, which I understand, I get it, but I genuinely think if you take the time to practice with this, it does a ton of damage. A buff that I saw that people said, you know, to maybe change this weapon is like if you hit somebody directly with it, then it just automatically explodes. I don't know if I like that, just because I feel like that kind of takes away from the identity and it doesn't really separate it from the CL40. And if you do that, I feel like I definitely think it's going to be too strong, especially because you're right in somebody's face and you're just spamming shots and you kill them and you kill yourself. And the finals is kind of dumb because if you kill yourself or the enemy kills themselves while you're fighting, you don't get the kill for that. So I feel like that would be really unsatisfying, you know, to go up against. But that's a whole nother discussion. I definitely think it's a niche pick. If you take the time to learn it, it can be really strong. But yeah, that's kind of what I think. Let me know what you guys think about that one in the comments. All right, so now we got the model. This one here, I almost want to put it in overtuned, but I don't exactly know. I feel like it's just here where it's like, if this thing got a buff, God forbid, yes, it would be overtuned. But generally, I think it's competitive. I don't think it's necessarily overtuned, but it is very, very strong. Once again, it's walking that fine line for sure. I definitely think in the right hands, it can feel overtuned, but as a general rule of thumb, there is counterplay, right? Even though it can hit you with those longer ranges, if you do keep your distance, you can out DPS somebody with it, especially if you're good at you know, getting the jump on them, right? It does counter lights pretty hard, right? A full body shot and a quick melee is enough to kill a light, which I think might be a little too much. Personally, maybe, you know, bring down the damage just a little bit. But as it stands right now, once again, I don't necessarily think it's overtuned, because if we look at the other options on the medium, you got the CL40, the FCar, the AKM, I think they all kind of go hand in hand, and I don't think there's a situation where this is the only pick that you should be using, unlike what we're about to talk about. So yeah, now time for the elephant in the room. We have the Pike. I'm just going to throw that in overtuned. Even though it got changed so it can't kill lights in 3 body shots anymore, thank God. Yeah, it's still really strong. If you hit headshots, you're going to absolutely murk people. I made a guide on it if you want to learn how to be more consistent with it. Of course, the time to kills and all that stuff are outdated now, but yeah, this weapon is super consistent. You can put iron sights if you struggle with the ACOG at close range, but I don't really think I have to talk a whole lot about this. Even with the nerf, it still does a ton of damage. The headshots are nuts. It's so good at long range. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no contesting it with like anything on the medium. You can try to do it with the sniper. We'll talk about that later. But I don't know. It's just really forgiving. So right now, still definitely overtuned. I don't know what they can do to fix it. Maybe lower the damage, the magazine size. But personally, I would just do the fire rate, right? You want it to be long range, so punish people for just spamming shots. That's my thought. Let me know what you think in the comments. But definitely overtuned, as I see it right now. Alright, now we got the R357. I'm going to slap this right in competitive. Before I would have put this in okay, but with the addition of the sight, right, not having to use the irons, this thing is so consistent. Like, just try it. If you don't believe me, put on the sight, and it feels like a completely different weapon. Super, super strong. I don't want to talk too much on it because, you know, once again, the damage on it's good. Even though you only have 6 shots and it's kind of unforgiving, you know, 149 for a headshot, basically one-shotting a light, 3 shots for a heavy, 2 shots for a medium. If you really line up those shots, and with the sight, it's easier than ever. This weapon is very strong, so definitely go give that a try. Alright, next up we got the Riot Shield. A lot of people might say, like, avoid the Riot Shield. I'm going to put it in niche, because I genuinely think there are builds where you can use it effectively. Maybe not as effectively as something like the Dagger or the Bow, but it's nowhere near the dual blades here, so I don't feel good putting these in the same tier. As I said, there are some cool techs. Once again, I've made a video on like basically every weapon in this game. I'm not trying to self-promo, but genuinely there's some good stuff on there. You can like cancel out grenade damage, cancel out mine damage. There's some cool kill combos in there, and it actually got a damage buff not too long ago, which made it a lot more consistent against mediums. So yeah, I don't think the Riot Shield is as bad as people say. I know it has a very devout following for a reason, so that's where I stand on the Riot Shield. Alright, we got the SA-1216. Gonna slap this in competitive. It's a shotgun, right? So you're thinking, well, aren't there a lot of disadvantages? Yes and no. When the mesh shield got nerfed, this weapon did take a pretty hard hit, because the mesh shield and the SA-1216 were like bread and butter. But even after that nerf, this thing still does a ton of damage, and really doesn't take a lot of skill. You can kind of just spam it. So, once again, even though it is weak at those longer ranges, especially with like the winch claw, if you get people in your face, you're gonna absolutely light them up. So once again, I think the 1216 is still competitive. Just stop crying, put away the mesh shield, try something new, try the charge and slam. Yeah, it works really good with this too. Gets you in people's faces. So yeah, SA-1216 definitely competitive. All right, we got the SH-1900. A lot of people don't like this thing. I definitely think it's competitive. I think this is a skilled option for the light, which did not used to be the case when it first came out. People would just run invis, come up behind you, miss half the pellets with one shot, and then kill you on every build. Because you can actually two-shot a heavy, that's why I'm putting this here. If you stun gun a heavy and then land both shots, which really, I don't think is that hard, right? Stun gun them, 2 shots, dash away. Super simple. Like, if you can't get up in their face, drop a Vanish Bomb, then pull out your stun gun, then shoot them, and then finish them off. It's super, super consistent, especially against lights. You can one-shot lights, you can two-shot mediums. You don't even have to land all your shots. This thing is like the assassination weapon for people who suck with the Dagger. So as it stands right now, super, super good. Give it a try, and that's where I stand on that one. All right, this time we got the Sledgehammer. I'm gonna put that in competitive immediately. I'm not gonna talk too much on this. Sledgehammer, right? Super consistent. It can break walls. It's good at getting rid of campers. It's also very good at camping itself. The synergy with the winch claw and the goo gun is just absolutely amazing. Sledgehammer has always been consistent. Being able to one-shot lights with that heavy attack is always very nice. So yeah, Sledgehammer, it's a classic, definitely competitive, and I highly recommend you give it a try. Next up, we got the Spear, and I'm going to put this in avoid immediately. I feel like I don't have to talk too much about this. They buffed how fast the little spin attack was, but what sucks about the Spear, right? You can still lose duels against the Sledgehammer when you're using the Spear, which I think personally is so stupid because the Spear has no added versatility, right? Sledgehammer, you can break walls and do a heavy attack that does a bunch of damage, and if you're good with the Sledgehammer, you'll beat the Spear. And it's like, why would I use the Spear when I can break walls with the Sledge? This thing needs a rework, something, right? Maybe when you do that spin, it like sucks people in, really like, you know, leaning into that aggressive playstyle. But as it stands right now, yeah, don't use the spear, definitely use the Sledgehammer. Alright, now we have the SR-84, the sniper. I'm going to put that in competitive. It did get changed, so now it's technically a, it has bullet drop as well as travel time, but that really only takes effect at those longer ranges. For the people who used to camp in the back of the map, I'm sorry it doesn't work anymore, but the way I used it, and I see the best players use it, you're not sitting in the back of the map, you're in there actually helping your team, and for that reason, you can still one-shot lice to the head, headshots against heavies and mediums still do a ton of damage, so if you're using this thing like in an aggressive manner, I still think it's very good, and at the same time, right, they changed it to a projectile weapon, but people are going to adapt, right? Eventually, people are going to figure out how to shoot this thing at those longer ranges again, and we're going to be right back to where we started, so definitely, I think it's still viable, competitive even. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about that one. All right, next up we have the sword. So a lot of people are probably thinking I'm going to put it in niche, but I'm actually going to put the sword in competitive. And the reason being, right, it really doesn't take a whole lot to pick up the sword and do well when compared to something like the dagger, right? The heavy attack it does a ton of damage, right? If you don't want to learn all the crazy combos, like gadget canceling and doing all this crazy stuff, right? You don't have to do that. If you just use the sword with the evasive dash, all you do is lunge dash, right? You can kill a medium in 2, you can kill a light in a dash and a quick melee, or a dash and a regular swing, right? There's a lot of forgiveness when compared to something like the dagger. Like I said, if you miss that heavy attack, you're done. But with the sword, as long as you're charging those shots and hitting like 1, I really don't think it's that bad to use. And if you're really, really good with the sword, I would even wager it's like up here, especially because it got buffed this season. Like the best sword users in the game, I see them wipe teams consistently. I was actually in a game not too long ago. I watched a guy on my team like wipe both enemy teams, right? Just wiped both of them with the sword all by himself. So the sword, if you know what you're doing, is absolutely amazing. But even if you don't, I still think you can find success. If you don't believe me, give it a try and let me know what you think. Alright, next up we have the throwing knives. This is kind of a tough one for me. I want to put them in competitive, but I'm also thinking like there are a lot of disadvantages, right? I think I'm going to put them in okay. They did get a buff this season where you can hold down that heavy attack, which is a big deal, right? They didn't nerf the damage on it. You can just hold it down and hit people, which is really, really good. But because it is a projectile weapon, I do have to factor that in. Another thing they did, I don't know how recent this was, the heavy attack doesn't go as far as it used to, which I think is kind of interesting. Once again, there are a bunch of kill combos, and I'm actually going to have a video coming out pretty soon, some more tips with the throwing knives. You know what, actually I take it back, we're going to put them in competitive, right? I think they do a good bit of damage, and just because that change where you can actually hold down that heavy attack has made it a lot more viable, and if you lead with that heavy attack, there are a lot of advantages, and especially with the video that I put out coming soon, talking about more stuff you can do with these, I think there's one technique in particular that makes these very strong. So if you don't believe me or agree with this placement, stay tuned for that video. But yeah, as it stands right now, I definitely think they're competitive. Alright, now we got the V9S. Competitive, super consistent, good at long ranges, good rate of fire. They actually changed it recently. They took down the rate of fire and upped the damage, which I love, because now my hand won't cramp when I'm trying to shoot it at max rate of fire. It does good damage. Once again, it's really good at dueling, so you can like peek in and out of cover and shoot shots. It also has really good hip fire. A lot of people say it doesn't. I don't really get that. I think the hip fire on it is fantastic, and yeah, there's really not a bad situation to have it. I don't necessarily think it's like overly better than anything on the light. Of course, once again, we talked about the M11 is going to be better, but as it stands right now, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not overtuned, so I think it's definitely a competitive pick. And finally, we have the XP54. I'm also going to stick this in competitive. This is, it actually got nerfed this season, right? It lost some damage, so it's definitely moved down. I'd say the XP54 used to be the best weapon in the game overall, but after the nerf, I don't want to put it in overtuned. I actually think it's in a good spot. It still does a ton of damage. You can actually still hit people at those longer ranges, but unfortunately, the M11, man, just that 40-round mag and the damage you do with it, right? The XP, you can still win those fights, but if you take a player with the same skill and put them in the environment where both of these weapons excel, those closer ranges, the M11 is going to win every time, right? It's just more consistent. And with the reduction in damage, you know, even though this thing is a little better at range, still not as good as that M11, so I think it ends up in the competitive tier, which is where I'd like to see the M11 in the next patch. Anyways, everyone, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to let me know in the comments section down below. Let me know what you think of my ranking. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I put too many in competitive? Because personally, right, I think player skill is kind of a difficult thing to rank, but personally that I've seen, all of these weapons can perform well, right, in competitive. Okay, I think are the weapons that need a buff. Ideally, I want to see all the okay weapons in competitive, right? Avoid, yeah, these definitely need buffed. And then niche, I'll let you guys argue in the comments what you think about those, or really any of these weapons that you think don't belong where they are. Well, you know, once again, this isn't just my ranking. This is also kind of going off what I've seen tossed around in the community, not necessarily the pro scene, because, you know, it's just a different environment. So I think this is more relevant to people who play the game more casually, or in a lower level competitive setting like Diamond to Platinum, right? This is going to be more relevant. Once again, at the very tippy top, they're always doing something like way different. So that's kind of my reasoning behind these rankings. Anyways, guys, this has been Combo. I hope you enjoyed the video and I didn't put you to sleep. But yeah, thank you so much for the support in my last video as well. You guys are the best. I'll keep them coming and expect a quick tips video in the near future. All right, everybody, this has been Combo. I'm done yapping. Stay home, stay safe. And yeah, peace out, everybody. Later.